Hello and welcome back. Thought I'd do a bookshelf tour. Find it's a really good way to see books that people have enjoyed, or the kind of things they're interested in that they actually buy and have in their libraries. So yeah, I thought I got a new channel. People don't know me, people don't know the kind of stuff that I read, and I thought, what a better way than a bookshelf tour. There's just a couple of things to note though. I moved to Canada after having lived in the UK for the first 30 years of my life. And so in 2013 I actually got rid of all my books, so I haven't read most of I haven't actually read most of the books I have in the library. I've kind of just been accumulating them ever since I properly moved to Canada in 2016. So yeah, like a lot of them I can tell you why I bought them and stuff, but not actually much about the book necessarily because I haven't read them. But I'm slowly starting to read some of the books I own rather than just library books and other books that I read and then get rid of. But I'm also not really getting rid of books right now because I moved into a house in August last year, so for the first time I have a dedicated space and room that I can just keep all of my books, and it's a really big house too, so I can keep a hold of them rather than having to get rid of some for space reasons. But anyway, on to it. This is the non-fiction shelf, so hopefully this will become a bigger shelf and many shelves as time goes on, because I'm kind of getting right back into non-fiction. Yeah, so probably this just to the top row, and that's the top shelf, and that's kind of pretty much music and film. So there's gonna be a lot of biographies, I think. So we start off here. This is Robert Evans, the kid stays in the picture, and so Robert Evans, this is just kind of like his life in Hollywood. I think he also wrote another one, but this is much more in depth. So basically Robert Evans was an actor who then became the head of Paramount Pictures, and some great films like these that were made in his time, like Chinatown, The Odd Couple, things like that. Very influential. Pretty sure he's not the nicest guy, but I'm sure it'll be a very interesting read. Haven't read this, but I think it was written in 1994, and it's been on my radar for many years, and I was lucky enough to find it secondhand a couple years ago. Next up, Peter O'Toole, The Apprentice. He wrote quite a few. This is Loitering with the Tenant Apprentice. Yeah, so he wrote quite a few memoirs and stuff, and just love Peter O'Toole. Haven't read this yet, like most of the books I have not read. But I did read a great biography on Peter O'Toole, Oliver Reed, and Richard Harris. Basically about their drinking habits and their exploits while drunk, and it was absolutely fantastic. And they were all pretty, I mean, I don't know if you'd want to be friends with them, but you definitely want to go out drinking with them. Well, possibly not, because you might end up in jail or whatever. But it was great. I wish I hadn't got rid of that. I don't know why I did. Should have kept it, but I'll try and find that again. Can't even remember the title of the book, actually. But I will hopefully find that again, and then can reveal it on here. One of my favourite actresses, Bette Davis. This is Intimate Biography of Bette Davis by James Spader. It's S-P-A-D-A, not James Spader, the actor. Yeah, one of my absolute favourite actresses, especially in her more noir films roles, but also things like Dark Voyager are absolutely amazing. Katharine Hepburn, this is Katharine Hepburn's autobiography, Stories of My Life. Again, I haven't read it. My wife has kind of read it, and she said it was quite dry. I don't know if she actually ever finished it. She said it was quite dry, but she'd also just come off reading the Joan Crawford autobiography, memoirs, but it's kind of like the opposite. So I don't know if she was maybe a little bit more influenced by that. But also I just love Katharine Hepburn as well. Really, really influential actress and award-winning actress in her time. Another Hollywood biography. This is Trumbo. This is the movie tie-in. Wasn't the biggest fan of the movie. It was okay, but I'm super interested in Trumbo, and Trumbo was he famously had to go into exile because of the House of Un-American Activities Committee in the 50s, 60s. So yeah, he was a communist writer. But because he went into exile, he was able to still write a lot of movies at that time, but he just had to get friends and other people to have the pen name and have the credit, just because otherwise those movies and movie studios would have also been blacklisted. I haven't read that yet, but I have watched the movie, and like I said, the movie's okay. Oh, I wanted to like it a little bit more. It kind of doesn't quite go as in depth as I would like to, and there's at least one character who's a bit of a composite of a few characters. So it's like I'm less into biopics that composite a lot of characters and stuff. So that was my kind of take on it. It's quite a few years ago that I watched it now, so the memory's a little bit hazy, but I just remember not liking it as much as I wanted to. This is probably the jewel of the collection of my Hollywood so far. This is Fay Wray, Canadian actress. She was famous for being the beauty in King Kong's Hand, and the original 1933 King Kong film, which is still my absolute favourite version of King Kong. The creation of King Kong on a special effects puppetry level is amazing. Very, very influential to possibly my favourite filmmaker of all time, possibly Ray Harryhausen. I can't remember the creator of King Kong, of the puppet, but definitely I think Ray Harryhausen has spoken widely about how influential King Kong was as a movie. And actually at the time, King Kong had people running like out of the cinema where they're so scared. Like, it really generally had, like, they'd never seen anything like it before, and it was generally quite scary and awe-inspiring, really. So but anyway, Fay Wray, Canadian. What is also absolutely amazing about this book is I have a few of these books I got second hand, and they've all come from, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but they've all come from the library of John Campbell, with his mark there. But they all have like, yeah, I have a few of these, but this is probably the best one, the most in-depth. It takes newspaper cuttings. There, one fell out as well. All about the actor in question. They're really in depth. They also wrote date of birth and when they died, and I imagine they bought some of these when they were still alive, so they must have, as soon as someone died, they must have gone to their bookshelf, wrote it in. But it's quite stunning. And the best thing, and possibly the best thing I've ever found in a book, was in here. It's the stamps that Canada Post issued for Hollywoods in Canada. And so we got Joan Candy, Fay Wray, Lorne Green, and Mary Pickford. So yeah, that's super exciting. Gotta put that in. And then next up, Lauren Bacall. Got the famous Humphrey and Bogart and Bacall, and I believe that is from To have and have not. I'm pretty sure because it's he's wearing a sailing cap there, so I'm pretty sure that's to have and have not, and that was that their first movie together? I think it was. And it's also the infamous line of "You know how to whistle." That's where that movie line comes from. Yeah, one of my favorite actors, maybe possibly my favorite, especially her roles in femme fatale, or kind of femme fatale roles, or roles in the crime movies she did, especially all the ones she did with Humphrey Bogart. Their on-screen chemistry was fantastic. And also Jewish upbringing as well. I'm very interested in people with Jewish upbringings, as my wife is Jewish. Ava Gardner. This is my story, Ava Gardner. Again, haven't read this. Famous for being married to Frank Sinatra, as well as super famous. Again, one of the best femme fatales. My favorite of hers is probably it's probably the what was it called, The Killers. It was the great adaptation by Robert Sidemark of a short story by Ernest Hemingway, but literally the short story is the opening, and then Robert Sidemark and whoever he worked with created this entire movie, entire background to this like first scene, and just ran with it, and it's incredible. And she's very, very good in it as this double. You're never really sure where her loyalties lie until kind of at the end, and it's great. But another one of her movies, actually, which is to note, is Pandora and the Flying Dutchman, which is this with James. Oh, what's the British actor's name? Oh, I can't. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's this kind of, so it's the kind of the story of the Flying Dutchman, but also kind of with a little bit of the Pandora chaos kind of story kind of mixed in, but like there's a reason she's called Pandora. But it's mainly the Flying Dutchman story, but set in I believe it's contemporary, so probably 1960s Spain. And yeah, it's really incredible. I think it's I think it's filmed in Technicolor as well. I think it's one of those ones Martin Scorsese really kind of loves it, and I think he was involved in the redistribution, and they did a great restoration of it and redistribution. It's one of those ones where he says back in those days when they did color, like it just pops of color. But it's a very interesting film. If you don't know it, you should check it out. And the locals loved her so much that they actually erected a statue. It was filmed in Spain, in Tossa de Mar. They erected a statue there for her, and I used to live in Spain, and even I was in Barcelona for about a year, and it's just up a bit in Catalonia, and sadly I never actually went to it. I always wanted to. Hopefully maybe one day I will go back. So another again, Elsa Lanchester, famous for Bride of Frankenstein. Bride of Frankenstein is one of my favorite horror movies. It's just such an amazing movie. It's very meta. James Whale is probably the best horror movie director of all time, in my opinion. His films are, I mean, they're horror, but they're so much more as well, and they're very much subverting what the actual monsters like. I don't think Frankenstein is the monster in the first movie. I think the monster is the mob rule. It's you have Dr. Frankenstein, who is the kind of, he obviously has mental problems, and he's a genius though as well, and he's fixated on creating life, and he creates life, and then the life is kind of ugly, and so it's kind of shunned, but it's also he's trying to teach it empathy, and he doesn't quite get it, and gets very confused, and it's really the mob that kind of really is the monster, in my opinion. But anyway, I digress. Let's just go into the books. Now into music. We got the Big Book of Blues. Huge blues fan. I'm just very, very obsessed with the blues. Love the blues. I'm very interested in its history. I've really got to read some of these books. So this is a biographical encyclopedia by Robert Santelli. So yeah, it looks like it's got all the big names there. Elmore James, Albert King. It has Eric Clapton, who was hugely influenced by the blues. Yeah, I got T-Bone Walker and Bessie Smith, B.B. King. Yeah, it's there. And then next to that is Alan Lomax, The Land Where Blues Began. Alan Lomax and I think also his father, John Lomax, were absolutely instrumental in bringing blues to a wider, especially white audience, and just recording so much. And actually a lot of the stuff they recorded was the first time even the people who were playing the music have heard themselves recorded. And I believe Muddy Waters was actually discovered when Alan Lomax, or possibly his father, went down. They were looking for someone else, but then people kept talking about Muddy Waters, and I believe they recorded him, played it back, and he was like, and the whole experience was just like, I can't do this. I can't farm in the south anymore. I gotta get up north to Chicago, which was one of the big destinations for blues artists at the time. And yeah, I think he just like packed his bags, went up and tried to make it as a blues artist in Chicago, and eventually met Leonard Chess, and Chess Records began, and the rest is history. There's a pretty good movie, Cadillac Records, about it as well. You should check that out. Miss Peggy Lee, the famous famous jazz singer, some incredible catalog. Did a great version of Fever, which is one of my favorite tunes. It's one of my favorite. I've been meaning to read this for so long. This is Sam Phillips, the man who invented rock and roll. I mean, he didn't invent rock and roll, obviously, but he was one of the first people to record a lot of artists who weren't necessarily getting the opportunity, and distribute it and really get them out there on the radio, and along with him and along with Alan Freed, really kickstarted rock and roll and American rhythm and blues. And yeah, so he's the head of some records. Hopefully it's not too fixated on Elvis. Elvis was great, and he was always looking for someone like Elvis, and he said he would make a lot of money if he could find a white guy that could sing like a black man. But his true love was of all of the black artists that he recorded, and actually one of the reasons he sold Elvis to RCA, sold Elvis a contract to RCA for $70,000, which was a lot of money at the time, but he probably could have made a lot more. It was Elvis was really, it was just too much fixated on him when he became big, and it was just drawing away from him recording the black artists, and that money also just meant that he could record so many more. And he did actually continue some studios right through the 70s. I don't know when, I can't remember when he died, but some studios went on for a while. And actually a lot of, not people know, but a lot of the Chess records were also recorded at Sun. He did a lot of recordings for other record labels too, so I think some of the Howlin' Wolf stuff got recorded at Sun Studios, but it's just the sound that he created, and that slapback echo that Elvis is famous for is pretty much Sam Phillips' creation. But yeah, very interested. I gotta read these books. So this is very niche. This is probably only appeal to like maybe 2 people right out there, or well, I mean a few people that come with fans and that, but probably everyone that wanted to read it has read it. I still haven't read it. I don't know why. But this is Simon Price's biography of my favourite band, the Manic Street Preachers. And this was written and released around the time of Everything Must Go, so the album Everything Must Go, so we're talking like 94, no, 95, 96, 96. We're talking probably 96, 97 here. I mean, I could just check, but whatever. Yeah, my favourite band of all time, and maybe I've been reluctant because between this album and the album before it, The Holy Bible, their rhythm guitarist went missing, presumed dead, and so it's got to deal with that too. And I was maybe 11 around the time, and 10 or 11, and it's really had a it was very it had a very profound effect on me, and sometimes it's hard to listen to some of the albums and songs that he created, because he was also the lyricist as well, so his words and stuff, and not knowing he's not really around anymore, and their success. I mean, I still love the band. I find them very divisive, and a lot of people don't really want to talk about the Manic Street Preachers, but I love them. I think that's one of my wife's books, but I know Paul Morley, great writer on music. Don't always agree with everything he says, but he has been a music journalist for a long time. He was also in, I think it was Art of Noise. So yeah, he kind of knows what he's talking about, but as with everything, it's a subjective, right? So you don't always agree. It can be a little pretentious too, but that's okay. I don't, it's, you know, not everyone's, couldn't be everyone's cup of tea, I guess. This is great. I really need to read this. Another one of my wife's ones. It's never mind the women rewrite rock. So yeah, it's gonna be about a lot of female rock and roll. I think it deals with Eka Belly, the Raincoats, Bjork, Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth, Veruca Salt, Courtney Love from Hall. Yeah, a lot of great people in there. Forward by Debbie Harry, obviously, so that's great too. Another one about rock and roll, The Sound of the City, The Rise of Rock and Roll by Charlie Gillett. So yeah, it looks like it covers a lot of black and white artists, which is great because yeah, it starts off with 1954 to 1971, which is great because too much of rock and roll focus is on white artists, I think, and doesn't really give enough credit to the originators, such as Bo Diddley. Even some of the blues artists like Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters had a massive. Sister Rosetta Tharpe is generally regarded as the grandmother of rock and roll. I mean, she did blues and gospel and stuff, but you know, without Sister Rosetta Tharpe, there's not necessarily rock and roll as we know it. But too many books on rock and roll are focused on the 60s. 60s is probably when music journalism really took off, and also the advent of television, and with also with, like, you know, the invention of the Telstar satellite, you had live feeds from around the world were possible, and so global communications really took off, and so a lot of the footage we have of any bands is from the 60s. Like, I don't even know if there's any footage of Elvis from the 50s on, apart from maybe on, like, you know, the American television, but not of any of his live shows. And apparently his live shows were just wild. Like he had to restrain himself on television. Famously, they would only shoot him from the waist up because they didn't want to show his hips, because they just deemed it too sexual. But yeah, it's just yeah. But other than Elvis, like, Elvis dominates the 50s as well. So it's like, but there's so many other people, even some of the white artists at the time. But definitely a lot of the black artists really get overlooked, sadly. And also, until Adam Free came along, it was still called rhythm and blues, or worse. And so a lot of that gets dumped with kind of modern rhythm and blues now. It's not quite the same. It is rock and roll, but it's just under kind of the wrong title. But yeah, and then then finally, it's album study of the Holy Bible. That's that probably should be next to the Mannix book. But yeah, that's the album before Everything Must Go. I have actually read this, a book I've actually read in my collection, and I wasn't a big fan of it. And it's no, who's it? David Evans. No disrespect to David Evans, but as a fan and a fan of that album, and also I was alive when that album came out, and that album was hugely influential. And like I was a little bit young when Generation Terrorist and Goal Against All, the first two albums came out, but I was right about 10 when 9 or 10 when the Holy Bible, so it was still over my head, but I was cognizant of some of the themes, and I listened to it on so much as well. It's weird, I mean, weird to think, but I also listened to the albums in order as well, and I was around at the time, but I think my main criticism is that he came to the Mannix from Everything Must Go, or maybe even later, and so he's kind of looking back on these albums, and so I don't think he necessarily understands their importance to Mannix fan. And I think he also found the Mannix after Richie disappeared too, and so I think also that is a massive a massive milestone in being, if you're like an original Mannix fan, it's a massive milestone and massive just thing to happen. And yeah, a lot of people hated, a lot of Mannix fans, original Mannix fans hated Everything Must Go and subsequent albums and how they changed, but I feel like they had to change into what they became, which is kind of, I mean, people call them middle of the road now. I mean, I think that's maybe a little bit harsh of a tag, but yeah, it's I think you had to. I mean, losing, it was not only a band member but a friend, someone they went to school with, and yeah, I think that has a profound effect. And you kind of just, it's also, you're becoming older, and you're becoming a husband, and there's just the early albums are angry, and there's just so much you can do. I mean, you can still have thoughts and you can still have outrage and stuff, but it's just the way you portray it is quite different, I think. But anyway, I mean, I'm sure that appealed to like maybe one person in the entire world, but that's the top shelf of my non-fiction bookcase. And so, hope you enjoyed this, and I will again do some more bookshelf tours, and I might bounce around, so I'm not just doing the whole of non-fiction and then the whole of crime and then the whole of thing. I might bounce around, just shake it up a little bit, but that's it. Hope you have a lovely day. Bye.